I want to give a special shout out to all my patrons first. Thank you so much to my Bibliospren, Bibliohowlers, and my Bibliomancers. It means a lot to me that you give me your extra support for my passion and hobby. Hi everyone, Petrik here. So I think last week I posted a video regarding the best endings that I have ever read as of 2023. But for today, well, it will be the opposite because now I will be talking about all the best first book of a series that I have ever read as of 2023. This is for those of you who want to start reading amazing series that begins with an incredible first book of a series. And in total, apparently I have started reading, whether I finished them or not, I have in total started reading 225 series. I know that is absolutely insane, and because of that number, it has been incredibly difficult to actually narrow it down to top 15. Top 15 first book of a series. No standalone, no manga, no graphic novel, and I will not be including first book of a sequel series in my equation. So for this list, for this top 15 or top 16, because narrowing it down to 15 is just way too difficult for me, these are all first book of a series and you can just start reading from there immediately. You can just start this series from these books immediately, and these are the best of the best in my opinion. I have no ranking here. Remember, these are the top 15 or the top 16 out of 225 first book of a series. So yeah, believe me, it is not easy. And you will have seen me talking about these books multiple times, but well, I cannot help it. These are my ranking and this is my list. So yeah, let's begin immediately. Because in my best ending video, I posted Hero of Ages, it is only correct that I start this one with Mistborn, The Final Empire. Similar to the Hero of Ages, or to be more precise, the first Mistborn trilogy, this is the trilogy that sparked my love for reading fantasy books, fantasy novels, and this one is basically the first set of books that I bought with my own money. And yeah, I have a precious bias toward Mistborn trilogy, but on top of that, I do think that this, as a series starter, remains incredible to this day. I have done a reread of Mistborn, The Final Empire, I think twice now. Yeah, I have read Mistborn, The Final Empire, the entire Mistborn trilogy 3 times now, and I love them all. Every time I read them, I keep on loving them, and this one introduced us to Gwynne, Kelsier, Elon, and all the other precious characters of Mistborn trilogy. And I remember reading this book for the first time and I was just so engrossed with Gwynne and also Kelsier's POV. And then reading the magic system from Mistborn, The Final Empire, I was just so hooked. This was what I needed, and the writing was just so easy to get into. Mistborn, The Final Empire, or the entire Mistborn trilogy, was what I needed to get me hooked into reading fantasy novels. And to this day, it is up to you to think whether this is because of bias or not. I still consider Mistborn, The Final Empire one of the best first book of a series that I have ever read. And if Mistborn, The Final Empire sparked my interest, then The Blade itself, or the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie, cemented my addiction toward the genre. This was absolutely incredible. Now, honestly, the first time I read The Blade itself, and this is the beautiful Curious King edition, absolutely stunning. This is Logan Nine Fingers, or the Bloody Nine. But yeah, back to the point. The first time I read The Blade itself, I was a bit taken aback because this was very character driven. Now, evidently that's what I love to read in fantasy books or sci-fi books. I love reading character driven books. And Joe Abercrombie's character work is impeccable. And right from The Blade itself, it was really quick for me to feel emotionally invested in the 3 main characters. Logan Nine Fingers, Sandan Glokta, and then Jezal Danlutar, and more. There are more prominent POV characters throughout the rest of the trilogy, but for this book, these 3 characters, they stole the spotlight, and I think it is for many good reasons why many people still talk about these characters to this day, even though The Blade itself has been released for almost 20 years now. I think this was released in the year 2006, so yeah, it's been 17 years, almost 18 years since the first release date of The Blade itself. And yeah, I just love this very much, but I was a bit taken aback because this one did not actually feature a lot of plot progression. It all depends on how much you care about the characters, and for me, Joe Abercrombie, with his humor and so many iconic lines in The Blade itself, nailed it. I think this is one of the top-notch, not only in grimdark fantasy, but in all the fantasy genre, one of the best first book of a series as well. I can say without a shadow of a doubt that I will continue to read The Blade itself and the entire First Law world over and over again. And if there's one thing that Abercrombie absolutely excels in, it was battle scene. And here is another author that I think is on par with Joe Abercrombie when it comes to writing battle scene, and it is, of course, Malice by John Gwynne. Now, Full disclosure, if I were to pick between Malice and also The Shadow of the Gods, I would say technically The Shadow of the Gods, the first book in the Bloodthorn saga by John Gwynne, is a superior book compared to Malice. But when it comes to The Faithful and the Fallen, there is something really special in this series, and that is the characters. The characters in The Faithful and the Fallen have become like real people to me. They have become like friends to me. And that, in my opinion, is something that John Gwynne did absolutely right in Malice. I love the characters in the Bloodthorn saga, but if I was forced to choose, I will choose the characters in The Faithful and the Fallen over all the characters that John Gwynne has created. I love them that much. Korban, Makin, Gar, not Lycos, of course, and then Storm, and so many more. I love them all, and to this day I still think about them, well, not daily, but very frequently, and this is the beginning of their stories. So this one is definitely in my list of favorites. The first time I read this one, just like The Blade itself, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars, but on second read, I gave them 5 out of 5 stars. I've been talking about the importance of character-driven narration and also the importance of emotional investment in the main characters. And that applies to this one. This is the only self-published fantasy book on this list, and this is Dreams of the Dying by Nicolas Lietzau. And remember, The Sword of Kaigen is not included on this list because that one is a standalone novel, but this one is not. This is the first book of a series titled 12 World, originally titled Enderal, but the name of the series has been renamed to 12 World due to copyright issue, if I'm not mistaken. But this one is an absolutely incredible character-driven grimdark fantasy. It is basically, to put it simply, it is Inception in a Polynesian fantasy world. And I think Jaspar, the main character in this book, and one of the other main characters, usually called the man in this book, I think they are some of the most well-written characters, even though they can be very infuriating, especially the man. Well, the man in particular is just so despicable sometimes. But as I said, this is a grimdark fantasy, but the plotting, the characterizations, and everything about it, it was just so compelling to me. And yeah, this one tackled the theme of depression and melancholia very deeply, and I think these kind of themes should be tackled more frequently in fantasy and sci-fi books, and this one is an excellent example of it. I cannot wait to read the second book next year, The Cure for Living. But it is suffice to say that Dreams of the Dying is one of my favorite books. And moving on to the next one, I have, of course, Bloodsong by Anthony Ryan. This one was first recommended to me because of how much I love The Name of the Wind by Petrik Rothfuss. And I think it is fair to recommend this one if you love The Name of the Wind by Petrik Rothfuss, because Bloodsong features a similar kind of framing device where the narration actually go back and forth between the past and the present, and also it features around Valin Al-Sorna, the main POV character of Bloodsong. And Bloodsong was originally self-published, and then it has been picked up by traditional publisher Ace Books and also Orbit Books. And I think this is still one of the finest start to a fantasy series that I have ever read. It is, of course, unfortunate, as I always say, that the sequels to this one, Tower Lord and also Queen of Fire, didn't succeed at capturing the brilliance of Bloodsong. But as far as first book of a series goes, if you love coming of age, you love battle school, you love framing device in fantasy book, you cannot go wrong with reading Bloodsong. And yes, this can actually work as a standalone novel. Sure, the end of the book do kind of give you a hint of what's to come in Tower Lord and also in Queen of Fire, but it is satisfactory enough if you want to stop after reading Bloodsong, and I highly recommend you to at least read this one, the first book in the Raven Shadow series. So that's 5 books done. Let's move on to book number 6, and well, I have to talk about this one. This is Empire of Silence by Christopher Ruocchio. This is the first book in the Sun Eater series, and I think many of you know that Sun Eater is one of the biggest highlights of this year for me. It is a serious highlight because I've been reading through the series up to the 3rd book, Demon in White, and all 3 books, all of them are absolutely amazing. And I think Empire of Silence, this is the only sci-fi book on this list. This is the best sci-fi debut that I have ever read, even better than Red Rising by Chris Brown when it comes to the first book of a series. I think Empire of Silence is just superior. It is absolutely stunning, and also many people have said that this one should be read if you love The Name of the Wind and also Red Rising Saga, and maybe even Dune by Frank Herbert. So Red Rising Saga by Chris Brown, and then The Name of the Wind by Petrik Rothfuss, and then Dune by Frank Herbert. But honestly, for me, I did not see a lot of similarities between Empire of Silence and also Dune. I can understand why this one is recommended to those who love the name of the wind, but even then, this is still different enough. And I kind of regret that I did not read Empire of Silence sooner. I actually knew about Empire of Silence all the way back in 2018, but I did not read it for whatever reasons. Probably, as always, because I had too many review requests and also TBR to get through, although that still hasn't changed to this day. But I'm glad I have read it now, and yeah, I loved it very much. I think if you're watching this right now, you might have seen my full spoiler-free review of Empire of Silence, and everything I said in that review remains true to this day, and somehow the series just keeps getting better and better. This is such a great example of science fantasy done absolutely right. And The Sun Eater is not the only series that became a spotlight for me this year. There is another one, and it is, of course, The Dragonbone Chair by Ted Williams, or to be more precise, the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy. I have read through all the books in Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy, and well, let's just say that this has become one of my favorite trilogies. And I think if I have to choose, the Dragonbone Chair will have to become my favorite in the trilogy, even though it is a very tough pick between the Dragonbone Chair and also to Green Angel Tower. But yeah, this is the Grimm Oak Press edition. For those of you who don't know, I made an impulsive purchase to the Dragonbone Chair by buying this one without actually reading the book first. I don't usually do that when it comes to special edition, but this one has a cover art and also interior illustrations by Donato Giancola. And plus, I have heard a lot of great things about the Dragonbone Chair anyway. It has been mentioned that this one has sparked George R. Martin, Patrick Rothfuss, Christopher Paolini, and many other authors to write their own magnum opus. And because of all these reasons combined, well, I have to buy it and read this book. And I'm really glad that I did. I know that many people have a bit of a criticism regarding the first, I think, 200 pages of the Dragonbone Chair, but I think the slice of life portion in this book is one of the best slice of life portion in any fantasy book. I love having, well, such a calm and also somehow nostalgic time with Simon. I love spending my time with Simon in Hayholt, even though he's basically doing nothing except learning about the world from Morganess. Even though this is the first time I read through the Dragonbone Chair, there's just something so nostalgic about this one, and Ted Williams' prose is absolutely beautiful. The world building showcased in the Dragonbone Chair show glimpses of the intricacies that Ted Williams has prepared in the world of the Austen art. I just love this one very much, and I can definitely see myself doing multiple reads of the Dragonbone Chair, which is something that a lot of readers I know have done for the Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn trilogy. Considering how influential the Dragonbone Chair is, I think this one is still relatively underrated somehow compared to many magnum opus and popular, widely praised fantasy books and series like A Song of Ice and Fire, The Stormlight Archive, and then of course The Lord of the Rings. This one just kinda went under the radar compared to this series, and I think that should be fixed as soon as possible. And just like the Dragonbone Chair, here is another first book of a series that I think should be discussed and praised more often. This is The Daughter of Empire by Raymond E. Feist and also Janny Wurts. I know what I said, I know that I will not include sequel series, but this one, this is the first book in Rift War Empire trilogy, and this counts as the spin-off. Rift War Empire trilogy counts as a spin-off in the Rift War cycle or Rift War saga by Raymond E. Feist. And I did read Magician, but I couldn't continue with the series. I just felt that Magician was so underwhelming, and well, it is outdated. The writing style is outdated, but this one, even though Daughter of the Empire definitely counts as a classic, I think it is still one of the most engaging and fantastic first book of a series. I mean, Mara of the House Akoma is just such a compelling main character. I think she is one of the best heroine to ever grace the page of fantasy books. Mara is just such a resourceful character. I think the way she utilized her wit to navigate the deadly political intrigue, it is awe-inspiring, and I wish more authors could actually implement what Raymond E. Feist and Janny Wurts has done in the Rift War Empire trilogy. And this one, for those of you who haven't read Rift War Empire trilogy, Daughter of the Empire actually worked as a standalone novel, so it did not end in the cliffhanger at all. And yeah, I think you should read this one. I mean, way before A Song of Ice and Fire turned into something incredibly popular like Now, apparently we do have Daughter of the Empire, and yes, you should read this one if you haven't done it. So I did mention that the Sun Eater and also Memory, Sorrow and Thorn trilogy are the series spotlight of this year. But how about last year? Well, last year I have The Dandelion Dynasty by Ken Liu, and it begins with The Grace of Kings by Ken Liu, the first book in the Dandelion Dynasty. This one is probably the most underrated book on this list. I believe at the time of recording this video, this actually has an average rating of 3.77 on Goodreads. Yeah, this is the lowest one of all the books that I listed in today's video, and I think it is such a shame. I mean, the first time I read The Grace of Kings, I gave it a 4.5 out of 5 stars. I understand the issue, but at the same time, after reading through the series, I totally understand the importance of having The Grace of Kings, because this basically works as a long prologue to the entire Dandelion Dynasty, and the series only begins in the Wall of Storms. But without The Grace of Kings, the Wall of Storms and also the Veiled Throne and Speaking Bones will not work. And if we're talking about the number of events that happen in The Grace of Kings, it was a lot. It is a very unconventional start to a fantasy series, but somehow it worked. It features omniscient narrative, it features head hopping, it did not feature any character-driven narration that I love to read, but for whatever reason, it worked. This is a retelling of the Chu Han contention, and to this day, I still feel really sad, and also, well, I just kind of wish more people would read the series up to the Wall of Storms at least. Especially if the reason you stop reading the Dandelion Dynasty is because you think the female characters in this series are not well written. I will actually fight you on that. Not kidding. Because this series features some of the best women that I have ever read in fantasy. Not one, not two, but a lot. And this one is just the introduction of some of them, like Gin Mazzotti. Gin Mazzotti is one of my favorite characters now, just like Mara of the House Akoma. And please, if this is actually the reason you stop reading the Dandelion Dynasty, please give yourself a favor and read the series, at least up to the Wall of Storms, before deciding to drop reading the series. And this is not saying The Grace of Kings is actually a weak book. I love Kunigaru, I love his rivalry and also friendship with Mata Zindu, and this is the genesis of the Dandelion Dynasty. I just love this series very much, and yeah, without The Grace of Kings, this series will not work, and I do think this is an awesome book, a criminally underrated one. But the Dandelion Dynasty was the series highlight of 2022 for me. So how about the year 2021? Well, it is the Greenbone Saga, and it begins with Jade City by Fonda. I have read Jade City twice, and my second read of Jade City was even better compared to the first one, and because of that, I have to include this in one of my favorite first book of a series. I mean, the Greenbone Saga is a series I have mentioned many times that I am biased about, because I just love this trilogy very much. The Greenbone Saga is the best trilogy that I have ever read. It is, at the very least, the best completed trilogy, because it is just everything about it is just amazing. The characters, again, just like some of the best fantasy books and series, they have become real people to me. I have known their personality, I know their behaviors and attitudes, and I can understand their actions even when I disagree with them. And Jade City is the beginning and the introduction of all these beloved characters. Beloved and also some hateful characters like Bero, and yeah, Bero. Even saying the name Bero actually kind of pissed me off, but yeah, it is intentional. It is intentional for Bero to be treated that way by readers. But then of course there are a lot of beloved characters like Kaol Lan, Kaol Hilo, one of the best characters of all time, and then Kaol She, Wen, Anden, and many more. I know that Fonda is often praised for her depiction of martial arts and combat scene, but I think more than anything else, I think it is her characters that really shine through the pages. These are some of the finest characters in fantasy books, and yeah, I love Jade City very much. If you haven't read the Greenbone Saga and then this is the first time you're reading through the series, and then you find yourself feeling very in love in Jade City, well, you are in luck, because Jade War and also Jade Legacy keeps on getting better and better with each book. And for the remaining 6 books on this list, all of them are part of an incomplete series. So let's start with the first one, and this is Kings of the Wyld by Nicolas, Eames, the first book in the Ban trilogy. And I know this has been marketed and also often praised as a series of standalone trilogy, But I do think A Bloody Rose would not work as good if you haven't read Kings of the Wyld yet, the first book in the Banned trilogy. And yeah, I know that Kings of the Wyld is my favorite fantasy debut in the year 2017, and it has been 6 years ever since Kings of the Wyld was first published, and then Bloody Rose, the sequel, came out in the year 2018, and up to this day, well, Outlaw Empire, the third and the final book in the Banned trilogy, is still not out yet. And I will be patient waiting for that. But for now, Kings of the Wyld is one of the most fun books that I have ever read. It's just incredible how Nicolas Eames can actually shift emotions from emotional, sorrow, and then to laughter very quickly. Not a lot of authors can do something like that for me in fantasy book, but Nicolas Eames did it with somehow seemingly with ease, because the first 20 pages, I almost cried already reading Kings of the Wyld. That's when I knew that, wow, if this keeps on continuing, well, this will definitely get a 5 out of 5 stars rating from me. And then, yeah, it keeps on getting better. Plus, Nicolas Eames actually included many Easter eggs related to Final Fantasy and also music in the 70s. The Final Fantasy one is the one that, of course, well, it appeals to me. I am a huge Final Fantasy fan. I have played every major game in Final Fantasy except the newest one because I don't have a PS5 yet, but my point stands. I love Final Fantasy. And to see Nicolas Eames include all this inspiration from Final Fantasy into this book and also Bloody Rose, it was an absolute delight. And at the back it is written, "Glory never gets old," and I think that is such a good tagline because it is true. Kings of the Wyld never gets old, and I already look forward to doing a second read of Kings of the Wyld and Bloody Rose as soon as possible. Hopefully, news regarding the release date of Outlaw Empire will be out soon. And for the next 3 books, these are what I would call the Bermuda Triangle of epic fantasy, because since the first time I read through this trilogy, and they are published way back before I read them for the first time, and even though a myriad of readers are waiting for the sequel, such an anticipated sequel to be released, none of them actually came out yet as of 2023. So let's start from the first one. I think you will know what the Bermuda Triangle of epic fantasy will be. The first one is The Gentleman Bastards by Scott Lynch. This is the Lives of Locke, Lamora. I think this is still the best heist fantasy book that I have read to this day. Love this one very much. I think the crew of The Gentleman Bastards is one of the coolest and entertaining group that I have read. They are just so fun to read about. And also, Scotland's usage of profanity in the words and prose is a work of art. So many curses, so many foul-mouthed words, and then there's of course a Locke and Jean, one of the best bromance in fantasy, one of the best duo. Love them very much. And yeah, I think The Lives of Locke, Lamora, just like, let's say, Mistborn, The Final Empire, actually work as a standalone novel. There is no cliffhanger after this one, and in my opinion, I think The Lives of Locke, Lamora is still the best of the Gentleman Bastards. What a debut, seriously, what a debut. And if you haven't picked this one up just because the series is incomplete, I think you are not doing yourself a favor. Read this series as soon as possible. And the second part of the Bermuda Triangle is of course A Song of Ice and Fire. So this will have to be a Game of Thrones. Do I even have to say a lot of things regarding a Game of Thrones? I don't think so. If you have well, if you are a fantasy reader, you will know the existence of A Game of Thrones and also A Song of Ice and Fire. This series, A Song of Ice and Fire, is pretty much responsible for a lot of grimdark fantasy novels being created. There are countless authors being inspired from A Song of Ice and Fire, and I think it is well deserved. It is not a surprise why that happened because this series is just that good. And The Game of Thrones, I think, is only second to A Storm of Swords when it comes to the overall quality. It is definitely a masterpiece in the fantasy genre. George R.R. Martin showed just how important it is to actually make sure readers feel scared regarding the fate of the main characters. When I read a fantasy or sci-fi book and then I feel that the main characters are actually constantly in danger and not safe from being killed off, that's when I knew that the intensity and also the sacrifice that the authors have put into the narrative paid off. And this is what George R. Martin did in A Game of Thrones. And well, many authors have emulated this. And I'm truly grateful for the existence of A Game of Thrones and A Song of Ice and Fire. Because to be honest, without the TV show adaptation, A Game of Thrones, I wouldn't have searched for fantasy novels to read. Because yeah, I fell into the trap of actually searching, if you love Game of Thrones, what kind of fantasy books should I read? And then I just picked Mistborn out of the options. And that's when it happened to me. I became a fantasy reader, a fantasy novel reader. So in a way, a Game of Thrones is kind of like the pre-alpha of Mistborn and also my journey in reading fantasy novels. And the last part of the Bermuda Triangle is, well, of course it have to be The Name of the Wind by Petrik Rothfuss. Look, it is difficult to talk about the Kingkiller Chronicle lately because of all the circumstance and all the drama due to the promise and missing one chapter of Doors of Stone. But I'm just here to talk about overall quality of a book, not about the author's behavior. And when it comes to the quality of a book, The Name of the Wind is insane. It is insanely well written. Petrik Rothfuss' prose in The Name of the Wind is just second to none. As Lin-Manuel Miranda has said in the back, no one writes like Petrik Rothfuss, and I agree with him. Every sentence, every page, everything is just meticulously crafted. The first time I read this one, I was feeling a bit disappointed because I was expecting actions and battle scenes to happen more frequently in The Name of the Wind. And it did not happen. This is not an action-oriented fantasy book. This is a slow burn, an absolutely well-written and slow burn fantasy novel. And I think, well, let's just say this. It does not have any TV show or movie adaptation, but its popularity, despite being only 2 books and now 2 novellas being out in the Kingkiller Chronicle, it is still one of the most popular and best-selling fantasy books. Let that sink in. It is that popular and beloved. So I think that's why it is also such a shame that Doors of Stone is still not out yet, because Petrik Rothfuss actually had all the chance to make the Kingkiller Chronicle become such a legend in the fantasy genre. It already became a legend even though it is still incomplete, and I think most of it is actually owed to The Name of the Wind. And for many years since I read The Name of the Wind for the first time in 2017 and then I did a second read in 2018, early 2018, I kept on thinking that, you know what, The Name of the Wind will always be the best coming of age and also fantasy book with a magical school trope. And then this year, it has finally been proven wrong because we have The Will of the Many by James Islington. This is at least as good as The Name of the Wind, in my opinion. And it actually has more actions and also, well, this is a plus because I know James Islington will finish his series. He is dedicated to his craft and I know that he is determined to make sure the series finishes as strong as possible. I am so waiting for the strength of the few, but for now, let me just say this. This is a Roman-inspired epic fantasy with a touch of Red Rising and also The Name of the Wind. I consider this one the best fantasy book of this year. Not counting sci-fi, this is the best fantasy book of the year 2023. It is a masterpiece, one of the best books that I have ever read. It was very easy for me to feel emotionally attached to Vis, the main character. This one is told from the first-person narration of Vis. He is the only POV character, and unlike the Lycanius trilogy, which features a multiple POV being told in the third-person narration, this one is very different, as you can tell, because this one is written from a first-person narration in present tense. But it absolutely worked. I am already a fan of the Lycanius trilogy, but I think The Will of the Many is his best book. At least it is as good as The Light of All That Falls, even though they are different kind of books. But when it comes to how well-polished the narrative and also how engaging the characters and the narrative are, this is at the top. I absolutely love The Will of the Many and it makes my heart happy seeing more readers becoming a fan of James Islington. And finally, moving on to the final book on today's video, the final book on today's list. Well, of course, it will have to be The Way of Kings, the first book in the Stormlight archive by Brandon Sanderson. This is epic fantasy at its best. The first book in Brandon Sanderson's magnum opus is just, well, it is staggeringly good. Kaladin Stormblast is one of the best characters that I have ever read. I love everything about that guy, even though, well, I still feel sad that many people think that he is too whiny. I do not think that is a fair assessment of Kaladin, because Kaladin, well, he's depressed. His depression is acute, and I think it is very important for us to actually feel an empathy, to feel sad about his situation and also why he cannot seem to move on past the issue that he had with his mental health. Because Kaladin is not asking to be depressed, and I know there are many people in this world that faces the same issue that Kaladin has, and I think it is important for us And I'm not saying that you have to actually care about him, but it will be good because it all depends on the narrative and the writing, right? But for me, it worked and I absolutely care about Kaladin. There are a lot of his thinkings that made me realize that I do resonate with him in a lot of ways, because although I do not consider myself having a depression, but I do understand his feelings and I can relate to him in a lot of ways. And other than that, I think the Way of Kings is very special because this is the beginning of Bridge 4, our favorite crew in the Stormlight archive. And then there is Sail, there is the magic system of search binding, and then there's just so much happening in the Way of Kings. And this is just how epic fantasy, in my opinion, should always begin. Intricate world building, lovely characters, amazing characters, and then sign of many great things to come in the sequel that has been achieved by Brandon Sanderson, in my opinion. Love the Way of Kings very much. And yeah, I think this one and the Stormlight Archive is a masterpiece in the genre, and I look forward to doing a third read of the Way of Kings next year. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it from me. Out of 225 series, this is the top 16 best first book of a series that I have ever read as of 2023. If you have started any of the series, or maybe you have actually read through all of them, do let me know which one is your favorite. And if there are any best first book of a series that you think should be included on this list, do let me know what they are. Other than that, I guess that's pretty much it from me today. Do let me know what you think about my list, and as always, thank you so much for watching and thank you for your support. Bye bye. Lastly, I want to say thank you so much once again to all my patrons who keep on supporting me.